All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Lisa White, sitting here with Karen Goldman. Hope that everyone's having a great day. We appreciate your participation in today's webinar, Debriefing on Recent Elections. Hope everyone's having a wonderful, wonderful day. Just wanted to give you a couple of quick notices. If you're not familiar with the webinar format, you'll see a control panel to the top right of the screen. You have an orange arrow to the left of the panel. When you click on that, it will minimize the box. We are muting all of you, but we encourage you to ask questions by typing them into the question box on the control panel. And without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Karen Goldman. Again, thank you all so much for participating.
Well, hello and congratulations. You survived the election, and from what I can tell, every one of you did quite well, so make sure that you pat yourselves on the back. Today is going to be a little different from the previous webinars in that, you're going to be staring at the screen you're looking at for the bulk of the day. I don't have any PowerPoint slides to give to you today. Mostly this is going to be a conversation. We're going to talk about what happened, what worked for you, what you wished you had known before you started through the election process. I have in front of me all of the emails that I received. I got 12 responses to the questions that I sent out to the listserv, and I want to thank each and every one of you who did respond. So as we're going to go through the questions, talk a little bit about what people said, I want to share some of my thoughts with you about what happened during the election, and then talk about where we're going to go in the future. So I was, of course, because this was the first time that municipalities had to verify signatures on mail ballot return envelopes, the first question I had asked people, those of you who had the mail ballot elections, how did the process go? As you recall, this was a process that municipal clerks were able to work out with the Colorado Secretary of State's office. It was a process that we developed to allow people to not have to buy a whole lot of expensive equipment. And for those people who did a mail ballot election and responded, the results were really, really good. Everybody thought the procedure was pretty simple. It was easy to use, although the judges may have gotten kicked out of the system, and believe me, that's happened to me as well. It didn't take very long to figure out how to use the DEO access. I heard that the Secretary of State's office staff was really responsive in terms of getting you your username and password. They helped you out if you had any questions, and so after today I will be contacting the folks down at the Secretary of State's office to let them know how it went, and of course to thank them very much for all their help and cooperation in doing this. So I think that was great. If there's people, again, if you want anything during this time, if you want to add anything to the comments, or if you have had problems or issues with this, please let me know. The other in relation to the signature verification, I was curious to know how many discrepant signature letters had to be sent out. And for those who held mail ballot elections, I can tell you that for most of the people who responded, the percentage of letters that they had to send out based upon the total number of ballots that were originally mailed out ranked pretty much from less than 1% up to about 3%. Now, there were a couple of municipalities where that figure was closer to 10%, but for the most part, it was under 3%. And that's pretty consistent with what the Secretary of State's office had determined in a survey they did after one of the elections that were run by the county clerk. I think what I also heard was that some people did not like the fact that they got the letters. They did not like the fact that they had to sign a form. They did not like the fact that they had to provide some kind of an ID to prove that they were actually the people who sent in their ballots. However, when you realize why we're doing this, which is to ensure the integrity of the election, I think that people's objections were probably more, it was just inconvenient for them than anything else. And I'm hoping that the people who complained were not the same people who thought that mail ballot elections were fraudulent, because obviously this is something that we're doing to make sure that they're not fraudulent. So I think that was pretty good too. The other thing, and related to this, I think had to do with, there was a lot of question that I saw over the listserv regarding when you bring your judges in. And remember, I would say it was pretty much up to you. And now that you've had an idea of how many ballots you're sending out, how many ballots you're going to get back, how many letters you might send out, you may decide that you're going to bring your judges in a little earlier in the election process than that you did this time. I mean, think about it. If you don't bring your judges in on election day in a mail ballot election, and they're still checking ballots in till like 3 in the morning, and I did hear that's what happened at one municipality, you're probably paying them the same amount of money that you would if you brought them in maybe for a half a day before the election. One of the people who responded had a fairly good voter turnout, and she indicated that their judges spent about 10 hours with the pre-counting process, the checking the signatures, checking the ballots, and that kind of thing. So again, it's going to totally be up to you in future elections how you want to do that. So again, the statutory towns, we always appreciate what you do. I always appreciate what you do all the time in everything you do. I also appreciate the fact that statutory towns generally serve as what I call the beta testers whenever there's election law changes. So thank you very much for your cooperation. And, I hope you didn't take a lot of ibuprofen during the election time. So anyway. I was curious to know if anyone came to your office on election day to register to vote. I know that one of the concerns was how do we do this on election day, especially if the county clerk wasn't going to be available after their normal, when they're beyond their normal business hours, and we have to stay open until 7 o'clock in order to do that. A couple of people did have folks come in on election day. They did report that their county clerks were very, very cooperative and helped them out. I think one person indicated that they never heard back from their county clerk, or it took them a long time to respond, and by the time they did, the voter had left. So that is an issue. I am planning on having, I want to set up a meeting with Pam Anderson, who's the executive director of the County Clerks Association and a former municipal clerk herself, to talk about the cooperation between the statutory towns and the county clerks. From what I've heard, the county clerks, by and large, were extremely cooperative and really very helpful, both in terms of helping with voter registration, also with confidential voters, which I'll talk about in a moment, loaning equipment, making information available. I just want to make sure that we can find a way to institutionalize that cooperation and make sure that all the county clerks can help us out as we need it. Because, of course, what they do is totally up to them. We can't force them to help us. I mean, beyond, they have to give us voter registration lists. We know that. But beyond that, they don't have to do what they don't have to do. So I want to find a way to see if there's, I want to be able to talk to Pam and see if there's a way we can do a little bit more institutionalizing. If you've had issues with your county clerk during the election without giving out names or counties, I would like to hear about that, because if we do need to ask them to step up their cooperative approach, then we need to know in what we have to do. There was this frenzy about recounts on the listserv on Election Day, and people were worried. They didn't know what the turnout was. They were afraid. They felt that where the races were going to be really close, that there was going to be requirements for recount. They wanted to make sure they understood how it worked. And it's pretty clear in state statute. I had a couple of situations where there actually had been a tie vote, and they were going to do a recount on a tie vote, and it was is my belief that when you have a tie vote, and you're pretty sure it's a tie vote, usually what happens in a tie vote is lots of times what clerks will do is before they release the unofficial results, they'll count the ballots just one more time in order to be sure. But if it's a tie vote, then there's no recount, but instead there is a procedure in statute on how you break a tie, and basically you do it by lot, which is the same way you put people's names on the ballot. And there are procedures about notifying the candidates when that's going to take place and setting a date and time and all that, but that clearly is in statute. So I did ask the question, did you have a recount? Because there were a lot of municipalities who were worried about what they would do, and only one municipality responded that they did have a mandatory recount. And everybody else said, no, they didn't. So I think what we'll make sure to do is have people understand a little better what the recount procedures are and how to do it. And the other thing that came up during the election, and I'm going back to signature verification now, was the confidential voters. And this was something I had not thought about. I don't think this was something that I had heard from the Secretary of State's office about. I did check the manual that the Secretary of State's office put out, and I hope people who did signature verification used that document to train their judges. And there was nothing in there that talked about confidential voters. So I want to thank one of the clerks who had some confidential voters and contacted their county clerk, and the county clerk provided information as to what they would do. And basically you scan a copy of the signature, you send it to your county clerk, the county clerk verifies the signature, lets you know if it's a legitimate voter, and then you accept what the county clerk says, and then you go ahead and you count the ballot. You verify the signature and you count the ballot. So we will make sure that we incorporate that procedure in any future trainings that we do regarding signature verification. So thanks to the clerks who did that. So keep writing your questions. I'm going to go through a few more questions, but keep answering you're posting your questions, and then we'll go ahead and take those as they come. I did want to know what resources and guides people use to prepare for and use during the election. And it was, in my mind, not only a legitimate question, it was also a question I wanted to ask from a very personal perspective. As you know, I live and breathe elections. I'm a self-described elections nerd, and I am on top of the listserv during the election cycle to be there to look at the questions, answer what I can, and make sure that whatever answers come from other people, and thank you all for doing that, really reflect what needs to be done. And then on the days when I am exhausted and my head is about ready to explode, I wonder about the use of the listserv. And this is me talking now personally. I wonder if there are not some people out there who use the listserv instead of researching the questions or thinking about the answers for themselves. And because it's easier to get an answer from somebody else than it is to go find the statute book or the election book or that kind of thing. And this question has always bothered me, and I've had conversations with folks here at CML about the use of the listserv and that kind of thing. And while I absolutely think it is a valuable resource for everybody, I just wasn't sure how people were doing it. Now, I do know that some people would use the listserv and ask a question, and then when they get the answer, it was basically to corroborate what they were thinking or what they were already doing. And for that, I appreciate. So I asked the question, what kind of resources do you use? And my comfort level is greatly increased because the people who responded did indicate that they used whatever they could to get the answer, that people were reading the statute book, they were going to the PDOs, they were attending the webinars, they were using the election book published by CML. And so that makes me feel better, personally feel better about the fact that people are not just using the listserv as a crutch. So I've been told that our listserv, of all the listservs that CML oversees, is the most active of all of them and is the most valuable. And Lisa's sitting here nodding her head and saying it's by far. So anyway, in terms of procedures, and this was kind of the last question, well, I did ask if people attended PDOs, and the answer is people are going to the PDOs and they've done the webinars. But the last question I asked is, what would you like to see in terms of resources? I am well aware that the election book could stand some reorganization, rewriting, additions, and I will tell you that CML staff and I are going to be meeting after this webinar to talk about what next and how we can do that. There is, I think, a need to embellish what we have in the book regarding the signature verification procedures. Will definitely include what you do with confidential voters. Clearly, we need to include a lot more on dealing with the UOCAVA voters. We definitely want to include some information about when you get your voter registration list from the counties, what you need to have included in that voter registration list, and how it gets from the county to the printer and what your role is and that kind of thing. Clearly, we need to beef up what happens once the election is over. I think there was a lot of confusion, and part of this, I think, is because of the way the statute is written regarding what do you do with the election results, what is a canvass, how does the canvass work, where do you publish, how do you contact DOLA in order to publish, what do you do with the oaths of office? I mean, there's just a whole lot of stuff that goes on after the election, which, people think, okay, 7 o'clock, we're done, the polls are closed, 9 o'clock, we've got all the unofficial results posted, now I'm going to go to bed and sleep for 4 days, that kind of thing. So we're gonna be working on things like that. There was another request to talk about the differences in procedures between a mail ballot and polling place election. I think for some of the newer people or for people who haven't had an election in quite some time, there was quite a bit of confusion. So we want to do kind of a step-by-step. Quite honestly, I think, number one of the first things, and I've been thinking about this, we need to do is to identify what you absolutely need at the very, very beginning in terms of holding an election. And that thing is to make sure you have the ability to cancel your election. While most municipalities do have the ability by having adopted an ordinance dealing with write-in votes, and that was interesting to me to find out the number of municipalities that didn't have the ordinance or that hadn't paid attention to changes in election law and still had the ability to be a write-in candidate up to 20 days before the election, even though UOCAVA ballots go out 45 days before the election. So there's going to be some basic things that we're going to say, make sure you have these things in place before you even think about an election. And someone suggested, and we've talked about this too, about finding a place, whether it be on the CML website or the CMCA website or both, where we can put forms out there. Now, I have to tell you that twice when I was working in Aurora, I asked people to send me copies of their election forms, and I got very little response. So we're going to try that again, but I think it would be really good. People had asked about an election judge's manual. There's one in the election book for polling place elections. Admittedly, it is quite old, but because mail ballot elections and polling place elections are so different, we thought about we wanted to beef that up as well. So those are the kinds of things that the responses I got and sort of my observations. So we've had a few questions come in, and I want to really make this worth your while. So I'm really looking for comments from people that I haven't, like I said, I've got 40-something people signed that I'm talking to right now, but only 12 responses ahead of time. So if you would like to chime in, I'm happy to read your comments. If you have questions, we can answer your questions, and we'll go from there.
And just type them into the question panel if you would.
Okay, so let's go. So it says, what happens when publishing? Oh, now, first of all, I have to make a comment. In all the other webinars, I've had Lisa read these questions because I couldn't read. However, 2 days after your election, I had eye surgery, and I'm happy to report that I can read. So yay for me, I guess. All right, enough of me. We'll go here. So the question is, what happens when publishing or posting requirements are not followed? There was one clerk who did not know she was supposed to publish the cancellation of the election. Is that the end of the question? Or is that?
It's continuing.
Oh, okay. And then the certificate of election is supposed to be published, posted, and reported to DOLA. What if not all those notifications were done? What's the requirement for publishing in the newspaper and filing with DOLA? DOLA told me there's no requirement for filing that they know of.
No date requirement.
No date requirement, no. Well, there is a requirement for doing all those things. So what happens if you don't do that? Well, I guess if you're not, if you're still working and no one's come and arrest you, I guess the answer is it's probably not fatal. But you've got to remember, it's if you didn't publish the notice of cancellation in the paper, obviously people knew the election somehow wasn't canceled. So the question is, what happens if these notifications are not done? And the answer is, I don't know what would happen. I would just say that it's obviously the election's over. If you didn't publish the cancellation of the election, you can't go back and cancel an election that never happened. But for those of you who had an election, the idea is you post the results. Obviously, if you had a polling place election, you post the unofficial results on the door. If some people post the unofficial results on their website. The requirement for filing the election results with DOLA, I don't know who that person talked to or who you talked to at DOLA, but I promise you that is a law. We used to have to publish the election results with the Secretary of State's office, and a few years ago that was changed to publish with DOLA. So if you talk to somebody in DOLA who said they had no idea, if there's no date, for filing it, well, first thing you know, you have to wait for any UOCAVA covered voters ballots to come back. You have to, if you have a mail ballot election, you have to wait for the deadline for the discrepant signature letters to come back. And once you have the official results, then you go and you post with DOLA, and you do it online. I'm not exactly sure how it's done. I know what they do is that if you don't already have a username and password as some kind of administrator with DOLA, you ask for one and they give it to you. And a question was raised, can we get something from DOLA that says this is the format they wish us to use? Now, the last time I talked to DOLA, they only cared about the fact that it was signed by like you and the person doing the canvas. In terms of the form, again, this could be one of the forms that we could complete because, as I said, well, I didn't say it, but the last time I talked to DOLA, they didn't care what format it looked like. But if everybody would be fine with a consistent form, we will go ahead and do that. I think the more consistent we can be over the municipalities who are willing to use the form, the better off we are. The requirement for publishing in the newspaper is, all I can say is you need to wait till you have official election results. What I used to do when I published in the newspaper is I took my abstract of votes, my election results, and I sent that to the newspaper. And I let them figure out how to publish it. If you want to put it in a different format, you could go ahead and do that. But basically, you show the races, you show any ballot questions, ballot issues, and you show the resulting votes. And you sign it as a legal publication. So, if that doesn't answer your question, you go right ahead and, let me know. Another comment that signature verification went very well and there were no discrepant signatures. And from another person, people used the listserv, local clerks, their attorney as the resources. Okay, so, all right, let me ask this, since those were all the questions. What would you, if we were to augment the election book, what types of things would you like to see in the election book? And I'm just going to hang out here for a couple of minutes and let's see what shows up. Again, if we could augment the election book, you let us know exactly what you would like to see in there. Okay, keep them coming. I got 4. Come on, you other 36 or so people. Now I've got 5. I'll give you all a couple minutes. Okay, I'm going to start here. Forms. People like the idea of including the forms. I do too. As I said, I've tried a couple times, and hopefully third time will be the charm, and even standardized forms, or at least a form that can be used as a template from which you can do that. In fact, one of the questions or one of the comments that were made that I got ahead of time was resources for purchasing equipment like ballot boxes or, I don't know, forms. There used to be I don't know if there's still companies that create the forms, but there used to be that. Maybe we'll be the company that creates the forms. For the person who said actual detailed procedure of the election, I would love to have more information about what it is you're thinking about. Someone asked for clear steps, rules, guidelines for mail ballot elections. I know that the mail ballot statute is kind of hidden in the part of Title 31 that deals with paper ballots. I think I mentioned that I had asked the question of the drafter as to why she put it there to begin with, and she said, well, mail ballots are really, they're paper ballots, and so we stuck them there instead of creating a whole new section. So I think it's just a matter of figuring out where it's located and going from there. So they wanted, so let's see. We have something, handling voter challenges. Apparently a couple municipalities were having issues with, that. And I think, and it's pretty clear in statute how you challenge a voter at a polling place election. It's less clear in how you challenge a voter when there's a mail ballot election or when you're challenging an absentee ballot. So there might be something we can glean in terms of best practices for something like that. Let's see, one for mail ballot, one for polling place. I think that's probably a comment regarding the the difference between things you do in a polling place election and what you do in a mail ballot election. So we get more. Did municipalities have issue with the ballot printing and mailing? Yeah, did anybody have issues? One of them did. But if you had any issues with ballot printing or mailing, I'd like to know about it. And then we have tips on approving referendum and initiative petitions as to form, determining sufficiency, how particular should you be, and example formats, forms and documents again. Okay. Ideas for an index for navigating the CRS for both mail ballot and polling place elections. So I guess, okay. Let's see here. Okay. Okay. I think that's it for right now. A couple of things. I'm still receiving questions. A couple of things. I heard from Kathy Novak, who is our CMCA Institute director, and she has been in contact with the International Institute of Municipal Clerks, IIMC, and has stated that IIMC is willing to grant points, CMC points, I don't know about MMC points, but CMC points for webinars such as the ones that we've been having for elections. Now, there's a lot of details yet to be worked out. The points would be awarded only if there was an assessment, and the determination of how we do the assessment, where it goes, how you prove you actually did your assessment is yet to be determined. But at least we know that IIMC is willing to talk about it, and we're willing to have that conversation with them to talk about it as well. The last question I would ask is, what did you think of this series of webinars? Was it valuable to you? Did it cover the right topics? Is there anything else that we need to do? And I will go ahead and entertain some comments or questions from you. And I've got one more. Here was a response. Someone had issues with the ballot printing. They weren't issued ballot numbers, and they were unable to provide a second stub that they could be removed. using when we moved the mail ballot statute into Title 31, ballot stubs and ballot numbers were being used by the county clerks in the elections that they conducted. And so at the time, we basically utilized information that was in Title I, modified it to fit Title 31 elections, which, as you all know, are quite different from Title I elections, and then moved it. Well, since that time, the ballots contain neither stubs nor do they contain ballot numbers. So that will go on my ever-lengthening list of changes I would like to see to the municipal election code. I don't think that anybody's going to disqualify your election for the lack of numbers and the stubs. So people seemed to like the webinars, that they were valuable. They liked the fact that they didn't have to travel. They were very convenient, cost effective. People didn't have to leave town. So apparently we were doing something that was right. I had something in my head that I wanted to communicate you, and I had totally lost it. Hopefully I will think, if I can't think of it now, I'll send it out onto the listserv. Another thing, I don't want to get ahead of myself here, but another thing that I want to be, let's see. Oh, here's a best practice question. For those who have to do a second final count to accommodate for you, do you require judges to be resworn and watchers to be recertified? The answer is no. In terms of the judges, once they're sworn in for all aspects of the election. And same with watchers. Once a watcher has been certified as an official delegate of a candidate or an issue committee, they get to observe the entire process, and that would include the counting of the UOCAVA ballots. And I still can't remember what I was thinking to ask. So, okay. I got you guys out early. Again, I really want to thank you for, let's see, here we go. Yeah, let's see. It would be a comment. It would be nice maybe as we go through the stages of elections that there be a quick webinar for different stages, sending out UOCAVA, sending out ballots. Maybe that'll cut down on listserv questions. We tried to do that. We'll look at that again and make sure we've got the right components in that. I just thought of my question or my comment I wanted to make. I'm not going to lose it this time. And we'll do that. But in terms of cutting down on listserv questions, I'm guessing, given all the elections I've been involved in, that's probably not going to happen. But sometimes people don't see the answer the first time, so it's valuable to see it again. Okay, here's what I was going to say. Signature verification. I want to thank Lisa Anderson for her email today regarding this, and it has to do with the amount of time it takes to check the signature in the DEO access. If you remember, when we talked about signature verification, my recommendation was when you go to the DEO access, you type in the person's last name, their first name, and the number of their residence address, hit begins with, and the name will come up. Well, here's something that is even faster. If you print the voter ID number on the back of the return envelope, if you ask the company that's doing your printing to print the voter ID number on the back of the return envelope, and then you go to an office supply store, and for $15 you purchase one or more handheld scanners. You can use this and plug your scanner into your computer using the USB port or whatever it is they use these days. And you scan. You can do two things with that number. Number one, When the ballot is returned, you can scan the barcode, which is just a font, and you scan the barcode on the back of the envelope, and you go to your voter registration list, and you could mark that the ballot has been received. You can take you take the first one, you scan in the barcode on your voter registration list, the line will pop up. You type in the date that it was received, you hit copy, and then for all the other ballots that came in, you hit paste, 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 and the date that the ballot has been received shows up on your voter registration list. You can also do the same thing in the DEO Access. When you go to the DEO Access and you have the place where you type in the information, if you put your cursor on the voter ID and you scan the voter ID, then you can go directly to that voter whose name is attached to the voter ID. It saves time because, number one, you don't have to decipher a person's handwriting, number one. Number two, you don't have to key in the number. You can simply use the scanner. So that is a great tip, and that's something that you may want to consider for your next election. And again, thank you, Lisa Anderson, for that information. So that is it for now. We will be looking at our resources. We will be looking at the election book. I've got some other ideas in mind, but you probably won't see as much of me on the listserv, which might be a blessing to you all. I do have to tell you that the day after the election, there was not much for me to do, and I wandered around my house, wondering, okay, now what? Just to let you know, I have committed, to stick around for a while and help out with future election questions. And I just want to thank you. Let's see, a couple questions. Can we do like an FAQ place at CML or something that lists the election questions and makes them searchable? There is a way to search the archives. Maybe that's what everybody needs to have information with. We'll talk to CML about getting everybody the ability to do that. CML, I want you to know that staff at CML and I have both collected all the questions that have been asked and all the answers. At least for me, I've kept all the answers that have been given, and we will use those as the basis for either basic instructions, procedures, or FAQs. So, we definitely are thinking about that.
Great idea.
Okay.
Terrific. Well, of course, I have to mention our annual conference is coming up June 19th through 22nd. Early registration deadline is May 11th to get that lower rate registration. So if you haven't registered, please feel free to do that by May 11th as well. Well, that looks like that's it. So again, Karen is available through our Municipal Clerk Advisor Program, not only for election questions, but anything else you need a little additional support with. So feel free to reach out to her anytime. Her contact information is on the screen. Again, thank you to Karen. We couldn't have done this without you. She's been such a huge champion and remains just an incredible resource, both to CML and to, I know, you and your fellow clerks around the state. So thank you all so much. Have a wonderful afternoon, and reach out if we can be of any assistance.
And once again, congratulations on a job well done.
Woohoo! Have a great day.